Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to the October Team Studio and TLCC webinar. I'd like to introduce my co-hosts, Paul Delanebbia and Howard Greenberg from TLCC, and welcome our speaker, Graham Akers, President of Brytech Systems, who will be presenting the XPages controls, What's New in Notes 901. My name is Courtney. I'm the Inbound Marketing Specialist at Team Studio and your co-host today. Before we start talking about today's topic, I'll be taking a few moments to tell you who we are and what we do at Team Studio and go over directions on how to use this WebEx webinar tool. I'll then be passing the controls over to Howard at TLCC so he can do the same, and then we'll dive right into today's topic. To get us started, I'd like to cover a few administrative points. To protect your privacy, the attendee list is not public, so you'll only see yourself as an attendee. All attendees are muted during this session, so you can participate by typing inside either the chat window or the Q&A panel on the WebEx ribbon on your screen. Use the chat window if you have a general question or comment, and the Q&A panel for your questions to the speakers. We're doing Q&A at the end of the session, but you're welcome to ask your question at any point in the Q&A panel, and we'll get to it once the formal presentation has concluded. This session is being recorded, and the link will be sent to you in a follow-up email in a few days. So a little bit about Team Studio. We may have assisted you in the past with application development. We've been delivering innovative developer tools and productivity tools to the Notes and Domino community since 1996, where we specialized in source code control, version management, and source code management. And we moved into the mobile application arena in 2010 with Unplugged. Unplugged gives you the ability to extend your IBM Notes apps out to mobile devices. The unique thing about Unplugged is that it leverages the powerful technology of XPages and provides a native app experience for the user. And these apps have the capability to function when offline. On May 1st, we released Unplugged 3.1. This version brings Android up to speed with improvements we made for iOS users in Unplugged 3.0 and also offers improvements for iOS users. With Unplugged 3.1, apps run twice as fast, and development of apps is easier than ever for both Android and iOS devices. We're very proud to have been the recipient of 2 IBM Collaboration Solutions Awards for Unplugged in 2013 and 2014. In January of this year at the Connect conference, IBM awarded Unplugged with the Best of Show and CTO award. And at IBM Partner World in February, IBM recognized the platform as a finalist for a Beacon Award. This product is available on the major mobile platforms, BlackBerry, Android, and iOS. In addition to Unplugged as a platform, we provide off-the-shelf templates like Team Studio Continuity for mobile business continuity, OneView for mobile approvals requests, and Customer View for mobile CRM. Unplugged works on all the major platforms, and we'd be happy to arrange a demo to show you how these tools work. Just contact me during this webinar in the chat window or contact us directly from our website or by phone. Coming up later this month on October 22nd, Team Studio's Wireless Wednesdays webinar series is back with an introduction to X Controls, the new cards-based UI for mobile and desktop IBM XPages apps. You can learn more and register for this webinar from the Team Studio website. Just scroll to the bottom of our homepage and find the section for upcoming events. Lastly, if you're developing an app using Team Studio Unplugged, I'd like to call your attention to our new assistance program that will give you development help for your Unplugged app. Now through October 31st, just sign up to learn about this Unplugged Developer Assistance Program and be automatically entered to win an iPad or Android tablet. Also, just a note, an exciting note, we will be moving from WebEx over to the GoToWebinar platform in December. So if you've been looking to access these webinars via mobile device, then you'll have that opportunity at that point. So with that, I would like to pass the presentation on to Howard so he can talk a little bit about TLCC, and then we'll dive right into today's topic. Over to you, Howard.
Thank you, Courtney. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. My name is Howard Greenberg. And along with my partner, Paul Delanebbia, I will be your co-host today. Let me just go ahead and share my screen here.
And while you're doing that, let me add my good day to everyone attending.
Okay, so hopefully you're seeing my screen.
Yeah, we're seeing that, Howard.
All right, thanks, Paul. Okay, a little bit about TLCC. I know a lot of you are familiar with us because since 1997, we've been doing self-paced courses for Notes and Domino developers, admins, and users. And we have currently a complete line of courses that are self-paced that you take using your Notes and Domino Designer and admin clients that cover a wide range of XPages, Domino and Notes development and administration topics, as well as user courses. And if anyone wants to try any of our courses, we do have a couple free demo courses out there for both 8.5 and 9.0. Among those are a really good 2 to 3 hour introduction to XPages course for both 8.5 and 9.0. So if any of you are joining us today, have not done anything yet with XPages and are just kind of wondering what it's all about, I'd highly recommend taking that course. It is totally free, no obligation or anything like that. You just have to sign up at our website. We also can help you as you take our courses, or after you take our courses, apply your skills to working with your applications and provide mentoring services. And we also do private instructor-led classes either at your location or can do it over the web using GoToMeeting. And finally, we also can offer, if you need extra help or don't have any in-house developers who can handle some of the projects you may want to do, we can do XPages development for mobile XPages or desktop-based XPages apps, as well as we can help you with any administration needs you might have. Right now, we're having a sale going on. We've extended that through October 24th on a lot of our most popular courses. So you can save a fair amount of money, you know, up to a few $1,000s depending on what you buy. So definitely check that out if you're in the need for some training. Today, Graham's going to talk about the mobile controls, and we actually have a course on the mobile controls. It's about, probably take you a little over 2 days to go through if you worked at it full time. There's a version for both 8.5 and 9.0, and we really dive into a lot of the topics. Some other mobile topics like how do you test your application, how can you integrate HTML5 into your mobile application, and how you can add Google Maps to your application, which we have a little image of that on the screen. So we have that course just for the webinar attendees. It's half off, $299. It's a great deal. We never offer it that low. So the URL is on the screen. It's www.tlcc.com/mobile-webinar. So that's a really great offer. We'll have that available through the end of the month. So we'll send you more about that in the post-webinar email. Some of our upcoming webinars, right now we have scheduled the next 2 webinars. We have in November, Paul and I are going to talk about the relational controls that are in the 9.0.1 extension library. IBM's added some improvements to the relational controls, and we'll go over those as well as just what are the relational controls and how they can help you access your data that's in DB2 and other relational databases from right within your XPages. In December, we're going to bring Graham back to partner with Mike McGarrell, and they're going to do a session they did at MWLUG this past summer on building your first XPages Java application. So that should be a great session. You can learn about these sessions at the URL on the screen, as well as see a link to all the previous webinars we got going back a couple years, recordings and slides of all the old webinars.
So to communicate.
Okay. By the way, to all the speakers, if you can go on mute when you're not talking, that would be great. Okay, so asking questions. Courtney mentioned this, let's just kind of review it real quick. In the WebEx interface, there is a Q&A panel that'll be on the right side. There is a place you can ask your questions. I have that highlighted on the screen. Please do not use the chat. I know there's also a chat panel. What we're going to do is go ahead and ask your questions as we go through the session today. As Graham's speaking, if you have any questions, go ahead and put them up there. At the end of Graham's session, Paul and I will take your questions and verbally ask Graham, and we will, verbally, he will verbally, respond with the answer. So we won't actually answer your questions in the Q&A panel, but that's where we want to queue up your questions since you don't have the ability to actually speak on the session. So that, let me introduce Graham. Graham is out of Vancouver, Canada, and he is the president of Britech Systems. They're a IBM business partner and a consulting firm. And he's been involved in Notes and Domino since 1992, and lately has been focusing on XPages and mobile and IBM connections. So Graham, let me transfer controls over to you. And you should be starting to get the presenter privileges there, Graham.
Right, so let's share my desktop. Remind me.
You go under View, and you can share your desktop. Just choose under Share, not View. Under Share, and then My Desktop.
There we go. Got it. Thank you.
It's coming up now, Graham.
There we go. Good. Okay.
We got it. Take it away, Graham.
Wonderful. Thank you. So this presentation I did at MWLUG. We were in Grand Rapids, Michigan, just at the end of August, and we had a little bit of fun with it. So I'm quite pleased that I was invited to come and share it with everybody online here. Howard did a good job of introducing or touching on all the points about me. The one at the bottom there, away from work, that I'm a cyclist. I think certainly some of the people on the session today know about the fact that I participate in the Ride to Conquer Cancer to raise money for cancer research. And when we were in at MWLUG, this is more to do with the Java presentation that Mike and I will do in December, but we used a bike shop, a fictitious bike shop, as our demo. So it was kind of fun to tie that in. Several of the presenters at MWLUG did that, so it was neat. We wore our cycling jerseys and everything. Okay, so what do we want to talk about today? We'll touch on, I think, what is probably pretty obvious to everybody on the call in terms of mobility and what expectations are today and going forward. I'm going to obviously talk about the mobile controls and how you can use them, and specifically touch on what's new in 901. And for that content, I actually went to the Mastering XPages 2nd edition book, which I have sitting right in front of me. And so I want to talk about the actual content that was included in that book, and then build on that in terms of this presentation. The next step is to look at the candidate application, and what I mean by that is that I took an application that was built circa 2000, 2001 in Notes 6 and use the mobile controls to put a mobile interface on top of that. So we'll take a look at what the candidate application looks like. One of the key things that I want to present here is the single-page application wizard, and I'll actually...
Graham, if I could just interrupt you, if you could maybe move closer to the mic, you are fading in and out at times.
Okay, sorry about that. We'll try again. So we'll actually do a demo of the single-page application wizard, and I'll explain why this is important. Just quickly to touch on, this presentation was a reboot of a presentation that Jalpresh Taylor and I did in 2012 at MWLUG in Pittsburgh, where we showed the mobile controls essentially, as they were in the extension library released for the first time. So I came back and like I say, I did a reboot of that presentation, and in fact make reference to it at a number of different spots today. So I'll kind of compare and contrast the difference, but the key thing that captured my attention at IBM Connect 2014 this year was the introduction of the single page application wizard and how, having done that presentation in 2012, the experience that we went through building and using the mobile controls and how much easier it is to use the single page application wizard. So I want to demo that. Then we'll actually switch gears and talk about the other options that are available to us as Notes and XPages developers from OpenNTF. And obviously, this being a TLCC and a Team Studio presentation, we'll look at Unplugged, but we'll also look at Bootstrap for XPages, which I spent a bunch of time working with and learning over the summer, and actually am actively building a system for one of my clients using Bootstrap for XPages. And I also want to talk a little bit about the X-Controls project that Courtney mentioned earlier. In the resources section, I've got a link to the presentation that we did in 2012 that has a step-by-step how to use the mobile controls. This I focus in more on kind of what's new. So the two of them are complementary, and obviously we'll have time for questions after that. How's the audio, Paul?
Well, mine was muted, but you're sounding better.
Okay, good. All right, so I think most of this is pretty obvious. I went and had some fun and went and found the original Motorola mobile phone, and actually that's circa the 70s, which I was kind of surprised at. I guess that's not the original one from the 70s. That's kind of one of the evolution models there. But what we all know, right? Even talking on this presentation about the fact that people want to be able to view it on their mobile device and that there's going to be a switch to GoToMeeting. You know, simple things that we all know: usage, capability, demand, and expectations all increasing. And of course, options are increasing too in terms of being able to deliver content over mobile devices. The challenge, though, which is also increasing, is that we now have numerous devices, different screen sizes, different operating systems, old versions of phones that are still in use today, and so on and so on and so on. So it becomes a bit of a nightmare to try and support all of those different mobile devices. And I've actually got the war wounds to prove it through a couple of mobility projects that I've done in the past. So, you know, I certainly don't want to suggest to anybody that the mobile controls in XPages are the answer to, you know, going out and building enterprise-level applications. In fact, that's not true, but they're a great place to start and to learn. So what you have to decide if you're going to be building mobile applications is, do you want to build native applications or do you want to build mobile web pages? So native applications, as we all know, come from the app stores. You install them natively on your phone and you use them in that way. Whereas mobile web pages, you know, you can obviously create links on your desktop, but essentially you're bringing up the browser and you're using the browser to use that application or that content. And that's what the mobile XPages supports, is simply a web page using the mobile controls, using the mobile UI, and so on. So important to make the distinction. Now, as I said, the mobile controls are only one option that you have in terms of the tools that you can use to you know, build mobile apps. And this is just scratching the surface of a list of the different tools that you can use. There's lots and lots and more increasing every day. But of course, we're all Notes and Domino people, and we want to kind of focus in on that area. So really just want to pay attention to the options that we've got as far as XPages and what's available from OpenNTF in the talk today. But here's the key message. You do need to be building mobile apps, and I think everybody knows that. And with everybody, of course, the challenge is having the time available to do that and to learn it mixed in with all the other demands of your day. But I would argue that probably everybody on the call has at least once in the last year or two had a conversation about building a mobile interface in a Notes application. So we're going to talk about how to do that. And XPages, again, simply provides an option. It is actually quite easy to do, and even easier now that we've got the wizard. So I want to dispel any kind of fears. Certainly, if you have kind of a rudimentary understanding of XPages, you'll be just fine. Now, of course, what happened, a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago? Apple went and released iOS 8. And this is a great illustration of how we, as developers building mobile applications, are at the mercy of the vendors, and I would suggest equally so in the Android world. When a new version of an operating system is released, you know, it's not like we building enterprise applications or even smaller than that have advance notice from the vendors on what those operating systems are going to entail. And interestingly enough, IBM, I think, was a little bit caught off guard by the iOS 8 upgrade because the XPages mobile controls do not work in iOS 8. So I'm sorry to say, for anybody that has upgraded to iOS 8, if you didn't know already, the demo that I'm going to show you, or at least the result of the demo that I'm going to show you, isn't going to work on your phone. I have been in touch with David Leedy even as recent as this morning. He's been monitoring this because for him, his company has built some applications on the XPages mobile controls, and they're a bit at the mercy of IBM getting them upgraded. So, you know, that's one of those things to keep in mind. And honestly, this isn't just something that impacts the XPages mobile controls. Any platform that you choose to develop with, this is going to be a concern and something you need to pay attention to. So it is an issue for us in this world right now. Again, I want to go back up to the top and say that XPages provides an option. It's a place where you can learn what it's all about to build a mobile application, and then kind of you know, pick your flavor from there on sort of the capabilities that you need to build for your application. So let's move on past that. So again, reiterating, we're building a mobile website here, so it can't be used offline. But the neat information here is that IBM has taken a lot of the guesswork out of needing to support this device and that device. And I won't suggest that it's a silver bullet, because certainly there are devices that either are older or are newer that don't necessarily conform to certain standards that IBM has followed. And so sometimes you'll find your presentation or your UI won't look the way you expect on all devices. But I'll suggest that it's probably 95% plus. So that's a good thing, and that's getting better all the time. This is important in terms of a best practice for keeping your mobile layer light. And what I mean by that is referring back to my comment about having the war wounds and battle scars from previous mobile projects. One of the first ones that I did, we were sitting in a room with the business team and talking about the fact that we had just built this Notes desktop client application, and now we wanted to build a mobile version.
Graham, this is Paul again. We are getting a lot of attendees and myself that are hearing you fade in and out. Just wondering if you can check your distance to the mic and maybe lower the head movement.
Okay, well, I will try and keep my eyes forward. The mic is literally about 10 millimeters from my mouth on a headset, so I'll stop moving around.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Either that or I'll talk louder. How about that?
That will do as well.
Apologies, everyone. Okay, so to reiterate then, in terms of keeping your mobile layer light, the idea is that you're not going to put the 60 fields that you've built on your Notes client application into your mobile web page. From a usability standpoint, your users will very quickly realize that it's something that isn't going to suit their needs. So the best practice is essentially to choose only the fields that you need, or only the content that you need on the mobile device. And obviously, taking a look at screen size is the best way to illustrate that. You know, ultimately, it's going to load faster and be easier to use and more intuitive. And I'll suggest, actually, something that I've found to be quite interesting is as I start to use Bootstrap as a UI for a desktop application, it's illustrating that desktop applications can be lighter too, that you don't need massive amounts of fields. That over the last few years, as mobile applications are becoming more and more mainstream, the thought process that goes into building desktop applications takes some of what we've learned from building mobile applications and bleeds over to the desktop to make it lighter and lighter, which I think is a very good thing. So that's been quite a fun observation that I've had. Okay, so to talk about how to set up your Domino Designer to be able to serve mobile web pages, This is an improvement in 901 over 853 and the extension library, where we had to manually type this information in. Now they've given us in the XSP Properties page the ability to simply check a box, fill out a field, and move on from there. And I'll actually show this when we get to the demo. Just in the highlight box there, you can see that the mobile theme has a drop-down, so you can actually choose the default theme if you wish. You can build your own, and you can even go so far as to override the theme on iOS and Android. And referring back to the Mastering XPages book, there's content in the book that talks about where you might have need to override on iOS and Android, specifically when it comes to buttons and things like that. So this is something that makes it much easier to simply say, okay, I want to support mobile apps too. Just a comment about the prefix, the M underscore. By putting that in, any X page that you build with that prefix will then have the mobile theme, and we'll show that. Some other concepts to keep in mind. A mobile X page or an X page or a site using the mobile controls is contained entirely in one X page. Now this is interesting certainly from the perspective of my candidate application, because it's got sort of something along the lines of about 15 views in it. So to have a menu and a view and then a form to view the content that you choose to see means that you're going to have 2 pages for every view, the view and the content, and then the menu, and perhaps other pages like, you know, congratulations, you've submitted your content and whatnot. In my case, means that I'm building a minimum of 31 mobile pages, all living in one single X page. So it becomes apparent just in terms of kind of managing the content and how you're going to build everything that you should use custom controls. And we'll illustrate that. In fact, the wizard generates custom controls, so we'll see that. Probably, you know, in terms of the navigation, it's better to show than to talk about. But the bottom line is that as we went through the demo in 2012 and this time around again, it became apparent very quickly that navigation is a really important thing to be paying attention to, and in fact, probably something that you want to spend some time on early on in your development process. I mean, it makes sense that you would want to kind of drag a couple of controls on and sort of get a feel for how it works, but then it's probably important to stop right there and think about all of the different pages that you're going to need and plan it out before you get too far into the development process. How's my audio?
It's better, okay. Graham.
Good. All right, so there's a reasonable list of controls that are available to us to build mobile applications, and the first and most important of the bunch is the single page application. That is essentially a container that all the rest of the content lives within. So you start with a single page application, and then you build your mobile pages or your application pages inside of that. And then inside each application page, which you can think of as a screen in your mobile application that you will transition from one screen to the next, you'll have a page heading and then the rest of the content, whatever that might be. Here's the interesting thing. The mobile controls are in a section in Domino Designer, but you don't just have to use those mobile controls as you build your mobile applications, and this is something else that comes from the Mastering XPages book. The other controls like data view, outline, form table, and form layout row also support the mobile theme, even though you don't find them in the mobile controls section in Domino Designer. So that's just something to keep in mind. And this is an illustration of the page that I built. So on the left in the outline, you can see here the list of all the different application pages that I have within the demo inside of a single page application control, and the fact that it uses a custom control. And then over on the other side here, we actually see the content. So the outer box illustrates the single page application control. This is an application page that I haven't highlighted. And then this is an application page that I have highlighted. So each of these application pages is a different piece of content in your mobile website. The top section here that says gas chainsaws is the page heading, and then the content in this particular case of view navigator control. So that's what it looks like in Designer, and again, we'll take a closer look at that in the demo. But what I am saying here is that there's a lot going on. By virtue of the design pattern that they've used, having a single page application and all of your content inside of one XPage, even though you're navigating to multiple different pages, becomes complicated to kind of keep track of, and this is why I say it's important to pay attention to your navigation as you're designing your application, not when you're building your application. Think about it in advance before you get there. Okay, so just to touch on a couple of items from Mastering XPages, and it's chapter 14 in the second edition. What I really like about that chapter is that it doesn't go back to the simple basics of material that's been covered before. Kind of, what's the stuff that is starting, XPages Mobile Controls 101. It doesn't go there. It does talk about some really key and important information, certainly the new stuff that they've put in, but then some other really helpful tips on how to build apps. And the first thing it talks about is testing with a browser. I'll touch on another tool that I like to use for testing. But the very first piece of content in this chapter talks about how you can use all the different browsers and set them up to actually show you what it will look like on a mobile device, even though you're testing it on a desktop browser. Another really cool thing, and I've bolded this because we're actually going to take a look at it, is something called DeviceBean, which is a little piece of Java that you can use to identify the device of the user that's using your application. And that's important because it can tell you whether you are using a tablet or a mobile phone, whether it's an iPhone, whether it's an Android, or even whether it's a BlackBerry. And you can programmatically decide what you want to show based on the kind of device that's being used. If it's a tablet versus a phone, you could perhaps have your content laid out differently. So that's something that I'll show. It does talk about the single page application design pattern, which I've touched on, but obviously it goes into more detail. And it does talk about the mobile theme and why you want to use some sort of a prefix to identify your pages. It then goes on to talk about navigation, and this is kind of intuitive, but we'll actually talk a little bit about the different kinds of navigation. They talk about hierarchical and using a navigator, so a couple of different ways of building menus, and then how do you transition from one page to the next, which we'll also see. The next part of the chapter talks about interaction, and this is something that's new and something that using your code, you can capture what the orientation of the device is, whether there is a finger touching the screen, whether it's two fingers touching the screen, and why you would use that. And I'll actually show a little bit of sample code that they included with the book. It also talks about themes, and I touched on this, the fact that there are controls in Domino Designer that are not in the mobile section that still use the mobile theming. So that was something that they talked about that I thought was important to share. Obviously, no chapter would be complete, certainly in the mobile world, as we're getting into it new without talking about debugging, so that's covered. And then the thing that I was most excited about, both the infinite scrolling and the wizard, which, as it turns out, both of these actually require the new extension library, so they're not out of the box. And for those of you that maybe don't know, the extension library, it continues to be updated. So as when the extension library was first released in the 8.5.2, 8.5.3 days, obviously it was a separate install, and then as they moved into 9.01, many of those controls that were available in the extension library became available in the core code. But the extension library continues to evolve, so there are new releases of the extension library available and new little bits and pieces that are made available. So we'll have a look at kind of the difference between having the extension library and not. But in terms of being able to take advantage of these two, what I think are really cool pieces of functionality in the mobile controls, you do need to use the extension library. Okay, so DeviceBean. It's really simple to use this in your code, and I actually have this in the demo, but all you need to do is call DeviceBean.isMobile and in a computed field, and it'll tell you true or false is what it returns. So you can see from the screenshot there, I was testing this with an iPhone demo, and it picked up on you know, what the device was. So as I said before, this is really kind of cool because it lets you perhaps deliver different content depending on the type of device that's being used to view the your website. Talking about orientation, and this is sample code directly from the files that are included with the book. When you buy the book, there's a link to some sample applications that you can download, and in fact, you can download the applications without having the book. Of course, you kind of got to pull them apart and figure them out on your own, but that code is freely available. And so this is just a couple of screenshots that include some of the code that was shared with the book that shows you the kind of things that you can do depending on, you know, in this particular case, orientation. So there's some specific CSS that changes the way that the content is displayed depending on whether it's portrait or landscape. And then you can actually capture the on-change event of the orientation, figure out which way the phone or tablet is situated, and then again, present different content depending on which way the device is oriented. Same thing with the touch and the multi-touch. There are events that now give you the ability to control or fire content depending on what the user is doing. So I think it's really neat to see the on-touch start and on-touch end. So on a particular page, if the user touches the screen, you can either pop a message or take some kind of action, or at the same time when they let go of the screen, do the same. And multi-touch is really kind of interesting and twisted my mind a little bit. You get into, you know, multi-touch, if you think about it, that's probably somebody who's going to be zooming the screen either in or out. And at that moment, you can calculate the width and height. You can talk about scale. And so again, the book talks about being able to kind of right-size the content for the screen at that moment when the user touches the screen. So again, what this is really an illustration of is just additional capabilities that we're starting to see with the mobile controls as the basics are used and we start to find other pieces or other functionality that we want to have. IBM is including that in the mobile controls, which I think is kind of cool. Okay. The extensions, again, this is the extension library that you need. I think everybody is familiar with pulling that down off of OpenNTF. This particular extension library, if it's installed, you get something called infinite scrolling. And infinite scrolling, to me, is a really valuable thing, and it almost jumped off the page at me because it was something that we found to be a bit lacking when we did the presentation at MWLUG in 2012, where you had to have a button at the bottom of your view that said load more. So the user was constantly having to tap the screen to load more content before they could scroll down. Now the infinite scrolling is really kind of cool because it doesn't make the user tap load more, but at the same time it manages how much content is loaded to the phone when the application is initially loaded. So by enabling the infinite scroll property, you can just let the user kind of continuously scroll. And you do see a little bit of a lag. Again, it depends on your content. If you've got thousands and thousands and thousands of rows of content, it's pretty valuable. Conversely, if you've got a short amount of content that you want to put on the screen, you might not even use this and just say load all the content. It's kind of up to you, but it's nice to have that option. The wizard, I'm not even going to try and do it justice talking about it. We'll show it in a couple of slides here, but I think it's a pretty neat addition to the tool. So let's set the stage with the candidate application. You've already seen me talking about chainsaws. I'm not going to try and flip over to getting everybody to raise their hands, but when we were in Pittsburgh, we had a little bit of fun, and I think everybody on the call here would agree that us being technical people tend to be the technical support for family members, and that's certainly true of me. I am getting phone calls from my dad and have been for probably, well, the last 20-ish plus years since I graduated from college. And of course, I've managed to go off and build a website for my dad. And I had a real good laugh at the presentation in Pittsburgh because when I asked the second question, I said, okay, you put your hands up if you do the technical support, and keep your hand up if you've built a website for any of those family members. And nobody put their hands down, which I was just shocked and thrilled at the same time to see. So I think we're all in the same boat here. In my particular case, my dad grew up in the 40s and 50s and was actually a chainsaw mechanic in the forest industry in British Columbia. And it turns out that he fell in love with collecting chainsaws and has something like 800 plus chainsaws in his collection. And so being a geeky chainsaw guy, he came to me and he said, could we build a website that shows kind of the specifications and history of the chainsaw? So, of course, me being a gung-ho domino guy 10 and 15 years ago, I said, sure, we can do that, and went off and built a traditional domino web application, which we'll show you in a second here. But this is what it looks like. And I will, at the same time, it's my baby, but it's pretty ugly. You know, from kind of the traditional domino website that we were able to build back in the day, we've now got the ability to make these things look so much better. I think everybody would agree. So this is the candidate application, and what we'll do is we're going to take the mobile controls and literally sit them right on top of this application with no changes underneath the hood. This is just a screenshot to illustrate the fact that I actually built this application in 2001-ish. It actually was built over a number of years. Of course, it's one of those things where he says, can you build me a website that shows the pages on chainsaws? And when I say yes, then all of a sudden it's like, well, how about we add this, and how about we add this, and how about we add that? But it's been a lot of fun to have over the years. And even more fun and more interesting, excuse me while I have a quick drink, is the traffic to the website. So when we did the presentation in 2012, I actually went off, and the point of this slide was to illustrate how much usage was coming from mobile devices. So this is the month of July in 2012, and you can see it averaged just under 1,000 hits per day. But the really interesting thing is that approximately, I'm going to say, 12, 13% of the content, or 13% of the device usage came from mobile devices. And for anybody interested, check out number 10 there. I'd be interested to talk to what the site actually looked like on a PlayStation. I found that quite amusing. So then let's fast forward 2 years and take a look at the same month. So our usage has increased to almost dead on 1,000 page hits per day. But mobile usage has more than doubled. And interestingly enough, Android has overtaken iOS as the number 2 spot in terms of the kind of devices that are browsing the content. But if there was no other anecdotal information about why you should be paying attention to mobile websites, a geeky little chainsaw site is being used by people with mobile devices, increasing every day. So that's kind of fun content. All right, let's demo. By the way, I'll flip to, here's the site actually live. So it's kind of the classic, simple, nothing terribly fancy kind of website built in Domino that we all know and love. Okay, so the demo that I want to show is how do we use the wizard to build a website. So we're going to create a new X page. We need to use the mobile prefix. Shouldn't be it. Let's do. All right. We've got our mobile controls. So we're going to drag over a single page application control. And you will know if you've installed the extension library properly, because if you haven't, this little wizard won't pop up. All right, so as I mentioned, you need to think about your navigation, and I'm going to keep it simple. I'm not going to show actually all 15 pages because it took me about more than a half an hour to build the first time around. But we do need a menu. So actually we'll call it home. And it'll be our navigation page. Now notice here there's a checkbox that says create a custom control for the content of each application page. You can choose to turn that off if you wish. I would suggest if you're going through this for the first time, leave it on just because it does a good job of breaking up the content and giving you the ability to manage it in smaller bits and pieces. So then what we need to do is we need to build a view for, and I'm going to build a view for the chain. So this is a document collection. You can also think about it as a view. And I'm going to build another view for the manufacturers in the site. Then what we need is we need a page to actually view the chainsaw chain. So that's a document viewer. We'll call that a form. And of course we need a form to view the manufacturer as well. The other comment I'll make here is that you have the ability to choose general, which is essentially just a placeholder for any kind of content that you want to have. So let's say you wanted to put in an About Us page and just have the content specifically in the X page as opposed to coming from a document or form somewhere in your application. That's when you would use general. All right, so we have 5 pages here. Now, as you notice, I should have pointed this out earlier, it says step 1 of 15. This grows as you add more content. So just to illustrate that, we'll put in another view. Let's just call it view saws. And you'll notice now it says there's 18 steps. So as your content grows, essentially you can tell just by doing the math, there's 3 steps for each page of content that you have in your navigation. So we'll take that out. Again, we've got a chain view and a manufacturer's view and then forms to view each of them. Now, here's something I'm going to point out right away. And when I was in MW this year, I had the pleasure of having Scott Souter sit at the back of, I'm sorry, not Scott Souter. Oh gosh, his name escapes me. Anyways, a member of the XPages team, Pete Jansen. Pete Jansen was sitting at the back of the room. And I called this out to Pete saying this was a bit frustrating for me. You'll notice that the default highlighted button in this wizard is Finish. And this actually caught me when I was working on the presentation the first time. You know, if you can think about it, I had approximately 30 pages of content, which meant that I had 90 application pages to go through in the wizard. And I probably got to about page 80 and wasn't paying attention and hit enter as opposed to using the mouse to click next. And it generated my page and I wasn't finished yet. So I had to go back and start all over again. So this is something to really pay attention to and something that I don't like about this wizard, that it defaults to the finish button when you're navigating through the wizard. Okay, so let's carry on. So our label is going to be, I call it chainsaw. And you can choose to put buttons in if you wish. You can choose to put a back button in. Of course, this is our main menu, so we aren't going to worry about that. Notice again, finish is highlighted, so you really got to pay attention here. And it says configure the application navigator. So now we're saying we told it that this is going to be a menu, and now it says, okay, what are you going to put in the menu? So we're going to put 2 things in the menu. The first one is called chainsaw chain, and we're going to point it at the chain view. And we're going to have chainsaw manufacturers. Now, something else to pay attention to is the width of the text that you want to put in your menu. You will find on certain devices that even this is too long. So that's something else to get comfortable with. And this is why I say when you need to consider building a mobile application and haven't done it before, try and pick something simple, use the XPages mobile controls, and you'll very quickly see the things that are gotchas as you go along. So it's worthwhile taking this first step just to learn. And again, like I say, probably you're not going to use the mobile controls for an enterprise level application, but at the very least, you've gone through that learning exercise before you get to the point of where you need to build your enterprise application. Okay, so we've got 2 entries in our menu. Let's carry on. So now we have the view chain application page. So I'm just going to put chain here. Do we want buttons? You can. As you see here, it's defaulted to adding the ability to create a new document. In this particular case, we're not allowing our users to create content, so we'll turn that off. And we're going to add a back button. So this is fine. It defaults to the word back for our navigation, and it allows us to say we're going to go back to the home page in our navigation. This is perfect. Make note of this, though, because it's going to be different in a second. Okay, so that's the menu. Now, yeah, it says we're going to point at a view. That's great. And we're going to point at our chainsaw chain view. And it picks a default data source name, which is perfectly fine. And we carry on. So now it says configure the view control. Notice that we only have one choice, that it's going to be a data view control, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but you don't have the option of choosing something different. If you want to use something different, you certainly can, but of course you have to go back after the wizard generates the default content and change it at that point. Now, just to point out, let me switch over. Oh, of course, I'm in the middle of it, so I can't do that. Apologies. I was going to show you what the view looks like, but we'll go ahead and we'll allow it to be manufacturer. So in the chainsaw chain, it lists the manufacturer. It's actually a categorized view. It lists the manufacturer and the part number. I want to show both of these in my view, but guess what? I only have the ability to choose one of them. So immediately you need to know that as you generate your content, you do have to go back after the fact and actually modify it to add columns or add fields or change the way the fields work. So this isn't, as I said before, it isn't a silver bullet, it isn't a 100% kind of solution, but at least it saves you a heck of a lot of the kind of basics for putting the whole application together. So this is the chain form, if you will, and the first column to choose, actually, you know what, I'm going to say part number because manufacturer isn't unique. Now, infinite scroll. Infinite scroll I mentioned earlier, leave it on the default if you're not sure. By the way, application default, do not choose this. Application default actually points to a config file on the Domino server, and the default config is disabled. So my recommendation is just to leave this enabled. Again, notice the finish button is the one that's highlighted, which I don't like. All right, so now the view manufacturers, we're not going to choose new. We're going to allow it to go back. But notice here, instead of home, it doesn't realize that the target page should be home. It just chooses the previous page in the chain when I set them all up in advance. So this is something to pay attention to. If you have multiple pages for navigation, you do have to pay attention to change this value. Again, it's a view. It's going to be the manufacturer's view. And all the rest of that is fine. We can only choose data view. Manufacturer is fine, and we're going to point at the manufacturer form. Notice we're on page 9 of 15. So now we're looking at the form. So I'm going to call this chainsaw chain. If you wanted to, and in many cases you would perhaps want to calculate the title of your page to be, in this particular case, the part number of the chain or some combination of text and formula. You don't have the ability to do that here. You can change it after the fact, but by default, you just get to put text in here. We do want to have a back button. In this particular case, it's also going to the wrong view. Again, this was the previous page that we were just on in the previous step in the wizard. So it's going back to that view, when in fact, this is the chain content, and therefore we want to go back to the chain view. This is a form. We could, if we want, add a tab bar to give us the ability to edit and delete content. In this particular case, it's view only, so I'm going to turn that off. And what document are we using? We are using the chainsaw chain document. We're not going to create a document. We're just going to open a document. You do have the ability, notice here now, we do have the ability to compute content if we wish. We can run form validation. In this particular case, it's display only, so we won't worry about it. And now we get the ability to choose which fields do we want to show on the screen. I'm just going to include them all. And notice here that we have the ability to edit this particular field and what kind of content do we want to show. So I want to call this out because it's limited in the different types of content that we can actually show. So if you want to be more creative with the kind of content, again, you have to go back and edit after you've run through the wizard. And I don't want to call that out as a bad thing. It's just important to understand that the wizard only goes so far. But honestly, it probably took us 2 days to build the content that we built for the presentation in Pittsburgh 2 years ago. And after having gone through it the first time, I would argue that it might take us about a half day, maybe a bit more to do if we had to build it all manually. In this case, the wizard gives us, it took me about a half an hour to run through, and all of the default content was built. So then you have to go back and you have to tweak from there. So maybe that takes you another hour or so. You're saving a lot of time. So I don't want kind of all of my complaints other than the finish button to sound like I'm complaining. I'm really just calling out sort of, not that it's limited functionality, it doesn't give you the full functionality that you need, so you just need to be aware of it as you're going through. Okay, so we've got the fields on the form that we want to choose. Now we're going to do the manufacturer form. And again, we need to go back to the, see in this case, it wants us to actually go back to the form, the chain form, as opposed to the manufacturer's view. We'll turn off the tab bar, carry on. We're at step 14 of 15. We're going to use the manufacturer's form. We're going to open the document only. And last but not least, we'll include all of these fields. Now we can finish. We're at step 15 of 15. And it goes off and it generates all of the content. So what's happening right now is that it's actually building the X page, but it's also going off and building all of those custom controls as well. First thing I'm going to do is hit save. And we'll have a look at the content. So we have an application page that is our chain view. We have an application page that is our menu. We have an application page that is our manufacturer's view. We have an application page that is our chain form, and we have our manufacturer's form. And you can notice here, I can grab it, in the outline, single page application, page, custom control, page, custom control, and so on. So let me jump up here. I'm going to close my XPages and open my custom controls, and we'll sort by date modified. Go to the top, and you can see now we've got this content that was just created today. 5 new custom controls. So if I wanted to, I could go into my chain custom control and go into my properties of my view. And through the properties, end up adding additional columns and whatnot. I won't do that just because of time here. But that's it. The only other thing that I wanted to call out, of course, you need to test it and take it from there. But I've got the finished product, so we'll have a look at that in a second. The only other thing that I wanted to call out is, again, the XSP properties and the ability to, you can put in whatever kind of prefix you want, but it needs to be unique, specific to mobile pages. So you just got to be careful about how you do that. But again, it could be anything that you want. And then you can choose, mobile default is what you will see when you start for the first time. I would suggest changing it to the One UI theme. It looks a little nicer. Between the two of them, not much to choose from, but they have put some new, just cleaner UI in this theme. And then if you choose, you can also pick your own custom theme as well, as I said before. So we won't save that. And let's jump back to our presentation. So this is what it looks like, and this I actually captured off of my iPad. So there's the view, and I didn't build the full view as you can see here, but we'll look at that in the demo in a second. This is what the manufacturer's view looks like, and again, I had to go back and add in the additional field, if you will, from the view, or the additional column, and then that's what the form actually looks like as well. And this is kind of fun. I'm just calling this out because my dad actually knows a manufacturer from Lebanon, Pennsylvania, which happens to be the current hometown of our good community friend David Leedy. So I thought that was kind of fun. All right, some quick comments about the lessons that I learned from going through the application wizard. As I said, limited choices of field types to display. You have to go back and change them after the fact. Only get to choose the data view control. Again, have to go back after the fact and change it. No opportunity to add an additional column to the view after the first one. And that navigate back issue that I commented on. No opportunity to do computing. No opportunity to save partway through. And this is why I say if you're not careful, you could end up generating half your content before you want to. As I mentioned, it took about 30 minutes to configure for the full site that I built and approximately 30 seconds to generate. So it's fairly quick to run. Okay, this is where the presentation goes completely off the rails. For those of you with multiple devices right in front of you, feel free to choose the very first link at the top there. And for anybody that has upgraded to iOS 8, I built a separate page for you to use that excludes the mobile controls, but does include the OpenNTF choices that I'm going to show in a second here. So feel free to fire that up on your mobile device right now and have a look, and I'll just talk it through while you do that. So the very first piece of content on the landing page here is just the computed field. It's got nothing to do with the mobile controls. It simply is a device. It just identifies the user content that identifies the phone that's coming in to use the page. For those of you that are not on iOS 8 devices, you can choose the first link there that is the DeviceBean, and that actually will tell you what kind of phone that you have. Whether it's a mobile device, whether it's a tablet, and then what actual manufacturer you're using. And the Chainsaw Collector's Corner link will show you the website that I built, the demo that I full built for using the mobile controls. Feel free to have a click around there. And then for everybody else, you're welcome to have a look at what it looks like in Unplugged and in Bootstrap for XPages. So in Unplugged, what I did was I downloaded the mobile controls, or sorry, the unplugged controls off of OpenNTF, and I just built a couple of pages. I've included links here directly to the OpenNTF page for the unplugged controls and the GitHub documentation, and of course there's a YouTube channel I think everybody's familiar with, which I found quite useful when I was going through and working with the unplugged controls. And I will say, as I went through it, I did run into a bit of trouble that wasn't covered in the one instructional video that I was using, and ended up reaching out to Team Studio for some help. So the comment that Courtney had earlier on about some free assistance, I would recommend. It was actually very quick and easy to resolve the issues that I had, but folks at Team Studio were very helpful and very responsive in just helping me resolve my issue. So I think it's a good opportunity to get up to speed fairly quickly with their controls. The key thing to understand here is that the unplugged controls that are available on OpenNTF, you do not need to use unplugged. You can use them like this is what you're seeing here is built with the unplugged controls in my dad's chainsaw website without unplugged itself. So the controls allow you to build mobile web pages just like you would build mobile web pages with the extension library or the mobile controls for XPages. And if you want the ability to do the offlining and have a native application on your device, then you can go ahead and use Unplugged. So I think kudos to Studio for making all of this content available for free on OpenNTF. And this is just an illustration of a couple of pages of content and what it looks like using these controls. I picked this one because it had a picture that my dad took more than 20 years before I was born. Okay, and then switching over to Bootstrap. The Bootstrap for XPages project has been getting a lot of attention, started by Phil Riand and now taken over by Mark Lusink and others. Again, there's content and links to the information on how to use it. As I said at the beginning of the presentation, I've actually started using this for one of my production applications for one of my customers, and have been. The learning curve's been reasonably steep, but the presentation is absolutely fantastic. And I took the summer to learn Bootstrap for XPages with the Chainsaw site, so I'm very close to flipping the site over from the old look and feel that I showed to the new look and feel, which, let me bring that up. So on the screen here, it's quite fun to kind of play around with the different presentation tools that. Yes, sir.
Hey, Graham. We're seeing a slide that says OpenNTF unplugged, or at least I am. I don't know if you're on a different monitor, maybe, or.
Maybe it's just catching up. I'm only running off the one monitor.
Okay.
I think that the presentation is just lagging a little bit. So if you just pause for a second, Graham, and wait for it to catch up, then you should be fine.
I will have a drink of water. Somebody give me the thumbs up.
Graham, we're not seeing a lot of activity. Still seeing that OpenNTF unplugged slide.
Do you see a lot of clouds?
Courtney, we're seeing.
There we go.
A bit more.
We're seeing the OpenNTF slide with Remington Arms is the manufacturer.
Oh, wow. So that was really quite lagging. Okay. Well, we'll wait and catch up. Is there any opportunity to maybe answer some questions while we're waiting for the screen to catch up?
There is a question from Slobodan. He missed where you launched the wizard.
Okay. So I won't show it because I'm thinking that the monitor is just catching up, but to speak to it, when you are into the Domino Designer and you have a new X page and you drag and drop the single page application control onto the X page, the wizard will automatically launch.
And that, of course, is assuming you're running 901 with the extension library.
That's just what I was going to say, absolutely. If you don't have the extension library installed, it'll simply just drop that control onto the page and let you manually work from there.
Okay, and we see the clouds now.
So when I was running DDE and actually showing the demo, was it staying fairly close to how I was talking?
Yeah, that was fine.
Oh, isn't that weird?
And we're seeing the chainsaw collectors.
Right, okay, so good. So this is Bootstrap for XPages. And as I was saying, it gives you the ability to have a little bit of fun with how you present your content in a view. So this is a view, and it's the same two fields that I had in the other view, but of course with Bootstrap, we now have the ability to play around with how the columns are presented and so on. So I was just, as I said, I took this as an opportunity to learn how Bootstrap for XPages works, and really kind of had a lot of fun with the different ways that I could present content depending on what it is that I wanted to show on the screen. So at the risk of things taking a long time, I'll switch over. Let me know when that switches for everybody. When it catches up, the view that I'm showing here is all of the gasoline chainsaws in the database, which is just over 3,000 chainsaws. So I had some real challenges with coming up with a good way of not loading all of the content that is presented on the screen. But what I am showing is a little bit of fun, and it's not 100% just yet, but a navigation control that has the alphabet as a pager. And then from a categorization standpoint, what I present is the manufacturer of the chainsaws as a panel, and then each of the chainsaws model numbers inside of that, using kind of the same paradigm as I did for the collectors. Has that caught up on the screen?
We're seeing gasoline chainsaws by manufacturer.
Excellent.
Alice Cameras.
Yep, excellent. Okay, so again, there's the navigator that will take you to any of the different, just alphabet categories. And then Alice Chalmers is the manufacturer, and then each of these is the actual chainsaw model that we want to present. Okay, so I've kind of digressed pretty good here, but bottom line is that, for example, you can, I don't know if you can see on your screen, but in this particular case, it scrolls off the edge. So there are different things that I still need to play around with to get the formatting and the presentation working nicely. But the bottom line is that just the different approach that we have for presenting content on the screen is quite fun and obviously gives us a much more modern look and feel compared to what we were able to do in the old days. Okay, let me switch back here. And tell me when that page comes back up. I'm back to my presentation now. When it catches up, what you'll see is the site we were just looking at, but I took the screenshots off of my iPad, so it shows a slightly different layout on a smaller screen. Gosh, that's slow. Any other questions?
Now we got a picture of a chainsaw. Oops, now we got your view, a bootstrap view, chainsaw, cane.
Okay, excellent. So we've caught back up to the presentation. And again, these are just a couple of illustrations of what you can do from a presentation standpoint using the Bootstrap for XPages controls compared to all the rest of what we've been doing. Okay, so I wanted to just talk very quickly about X controls. Courtney mentioned it, that the presentation is going to be coming up on the 22nd. I happened to notice the announcement on Twitter, and given that I was doing my presentation, and in fact, for my production application that I'm building, was interested in what they might have to offer that would be of benefit for my customers. So I downloaded it right away and opened it up. Matt White tweeted it out, and he's the owner of it on OpenNTF. I'm sure Mark has got some contribution to it as well. There's the link. It is based on Bootstrap, but it's also based on boot cards, and I'll leave it to you to do some research on cards, but I would suggest that cards is going to become more and more influential in our design as we go forward in mobile applications, and I'll leave it at that. It's worthy of your attention. It supports desktop browsers as well as iOS and Android devices. Of course, it supports Unplugged as well. The comment that I got from Matt was that it automatically adapts to the environment and presents the best user experience. So they've done something that I think is becoming more and more prevalent as organizations build tools for us developers to build applications, and that is to try and take a lot of the guesswork out of how should it look on an iOS device versus how should it look on an Android device. Of course, IBM has given us control over those sorts of things, and they handle a lot of those, again, speaking specifically about the mobile controls in XPages. But more and more organizations are taking that into account and are starting to say, okay, let's recognize what device it is that's using this page that's built with our tools and format the content appropriately. So I find it quite interesting that Matt and Mark are paying attention to that. Again, no developer involvement in terms of the UI and what have you, just drag and drop the controls. So the download that's available off of OpenNTF includes a database that has the controls themselves that you can play with, but it also has a sample application. And I grabbed a couple of screenshots out of that sample app. So this is a card, right? The workspace table, if you will, can be considered a card. And then inside of that, these little buttons, if you will, or big buttons, are cards as well. And lo and behold, they look somewhat like an icon from the Lotus Notes workspace. And then this chart here is a card as well. And the idea is that it's a formatting paradigm, but the neat thing is that the feature of cards gives you kind of drag and drop ability. If anybody's spent any time on Pinterest at all, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about in terms of cards. And then this is just another screenshot from the X controls that kind of gives an illustration of sort of the basic bits and pieces. I would suggest that it's a good first step, and I certainly expect it to evolve but it's neat to see kind of the thought process that went into making it much more easier for us as developers to build mobile applications. Okay, we're nearing the end, and actually I'm doing okay for time, aren't we? So the resources, the very first resource here is a link to the presentation that we did at MWLEG in 2012. As I say, that illustrates step by step a lot of the stuff that the application wizard handles for us, but it's very worthwhile to have a look at that and kind of get the background deep dive information on how to make your navigation work and some of the programmability of using the controls. And then the rest of these, I think most people are fairly familiar with. These are just friends of the community that have content specific to mobile application development. Paul has been doing some videos I think most people are aware of, and again, TLCC has got the mobile XPages courses. I also wanted to call out some of the content from Connect 2014. There were three slide decks in particular from presentations that I found quite useful. And all of those are available to be downloaded off of socialbizug.org. I wanted to call out Mobilizer as a testing tool. So I mentioned earlier in the presentation that the Mastering XPages book talks about how to test your applications. And Mobilizer is something that I came across actually at Lotusphere, I'm going to say 2011, maybe 2012. And it's just a little tool that's an Adobe Air application, and at the risk of taking far too long for it to come up, I'm going to give it a try, and you can tell me if it takes too long for the screen to refresh. But Mobilizer is just a little tool that simulates mobile applications, and I'd be curious if other people have other tools that they use that they'd like to share. Maybe make a comment in the Q&A panel, and we can share them with everybody. But these are applications that again simulate your website on a mobile device. How's the refresh, guys?
Just came up.
Okay.
Seeing the phone now.
So I'll let it catch up. But interestingly enough, I was just testing out with other devices this morning. So this has got a fairly long list of phones that it supports. What I did notice is that the Nokia phones didn't format correctly compared to what I expected. So that in and of itself is a neat thing to call out, just about the different devices and the different UIs that they present. And even more interesting is that the Samsung phones in Mobilizer didn't bring up the website at all. So this is why I say I'm interested in other tools, because clearly there's hit and miss. I've had some reasonable success with this one over the last few years. And I think we're very close to question. Yeah, just a quick summary. To reiterate what I said before, the XPages mobile controls merely give you an entry into the mobile development world, and if you haven't touched anything yet, in my opinion, this is a good place to start. It's not where you're going to end up, but it's a good place to start and a good place to learn. Obviously, the controls are being enhanced. I was really quite happy to see some of the enhancements between what we were working with a couple of years ago and what we have now. But bottom line is that there's lots of other options too. And going back to the fact that I had talked with David Leedy this morning, he's he's had quite a negative experience with the mobile controls, especially since the iOS 8 release, and is posting a Notes and 9 today that's fairly opinionated on the topic. So I will happily defer to him and his experience as well. Like I'm saying, this is a good place to start and a good place to learn, but not necessarily the place that you're going to spend a lot of your time. And the bottom line, my dad's a chainsaw geek, so it proves that computer geeks aren't the only kind of geeks out there. And with that, we will switch over to questions. Actually, I'll make one more comment. The slide deck is going to be available for download, and I actually screenshotted all of the steps that I took when I went through the wizard. So I'm not going to obviously go through those here, but when you download the slide deck, it's actually got step-by-step screenshots of the wizard. There you go.
Thanks, Graham. If you could switch presentation over to me.
Sure.
And Oh, by the way, while we're waiting for that, I got a call from the producers of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and they're doing a sequel, and they want to use your application.
You know what? Don't laugh. My dad's shop is across the street from a movie production company in Vancouver, and they've bought chainsaws from him specifically for those kinds of movies.
You could have like a specialized business there.
Absolutely. Okay, it looks like you have control.
I do.
Okay, excellent.
Okay, just a reminder to everyone, you should see my screen now, and I have an image of where you can ask questions in the WebEx interface. So there's a Q&A pane, and make sure you ask of all panelists, and don't use the chat pane, because we'll be looking in the Q&A pane. And while we're taking the questions, I'll just put up some reminders of some events coming up. If you're over in Europe, you got a couple of great events coming up. Theo's doing another great Engage meeting. He has a number of good speakers. October 30th in Brussels, there's DNUG, Social Connections, and DanNotes. And then a reminder to everyone about the Connect ED, formerly known as Lotusphere, formerly known as Connect, in Orlando, which should, with the changes that IBM has made, it should be a great show. So definitely check that out. So I think, Paul, you got a question lined up?
Yes. There's a question from Sue. How do you know if the OpenNTF extension library is installed? How can you check that?
Good question. Oh, and of course you're not seeing my screen. In the application properties, let me just be sure. No, it's in the XSP properties. So in the same screen that had the settings for the mobile theme, let me get to it. Under the page generation tab, so this is in Domino Designer, there's an XPage libraries section, again on the page generation tab. And it lists the different libraries that you have available, and the extension library is one of them. So you will see it selected in that list, or at least available to be selected. And it is org. No, it's not. It's com.
I'm going to show that, Graham. Hopefully.
You're going to show it? Okay.
Yeah, people should be seeing my designer now. I'm pulling up the XSP properties. Just had to rebuild
Perfect.
it.
So while that's coming up, I'll just, yeah, there we go. com.ibm.xlib.library.
So that's the second one in my list. I'll put a check next to it.
Yep.
And you can tell the date. Normally what I do is go into a directory and look at the dates. And if you're not sure, you can just download the latest. Most of the enhancements, I think as Graham mentioned, are in 9.0.1. So if you're using 9.0 or 8.5, there really hasn't been anything new recently. All the developments in 9.0.1. Okay, let me hide that. The next question, there was a question about the app you created,
yes.
Graham, and did you do anything for portrait mode or landscape? Because the person asking had a Samsung Galaxy and it didn't switch to landscape when he rotated.
Was that the Bootstrap or maybe
he said the
chat?
MW Lugs mobile app.
Yeah, okay. So no, I didn't write anything specific to pay attention to portrait mode or landscape mode. The majority of the content, certainly with the XPages mobile controls, should adjust automatically. In the case of Bootstrap, I have found in my testing that there is some that doesn't adjust automatically, so I've got to go back and pay attention to that. But I'm curious if it was the chainsaw site or if it was the XPages demo, the Bootstrap demo of the chainsaw site.
Okay, Leon, maybe you can answer that question in the question and answer, and we'll pass it on to Graham. So, Paul, do you have another question in the meantime?
Yeah, a question from Amin. First of all, Graham, thanks for the presentation. And the question is, does the wizard include a search button capability where you can just check off that property or check off that option?
No, that's something that you have to build yourself. So that would be something that I would use that general content page for. So you could put a placeholder in for search, but then you actually have to build that yourself.
Okay. And so we got a comment from Leon, Graham. Was the MW chainsaw not the bootstrap?
Oh, that's curious. Okay.
On a Samsung Galaxy.
Yeah, as it turns out, I don't have a Samsung Galaxy, so I wasn't able to do that testing. And you know what? This is a really good illustration of taking that step into mobile application development. And I can remember at Lotusphere a couple of years ago talking to Matt White and a few of his colleagues from the London Developer Co-op, and they told me that they had a drawer probably with about 14 different phones in it that they had to have in order to do the testing. Now, again, this was a couple of years ago, and like I say, the Mastering XPages book does have specifically pays attention to how you can use your browser to do that testing. And as I say that, I think, oh, maybe I should have done that myself. But anyway, it's a perfect illustration of the fact that now we're building applications that work on multiple different devices, and you may very well not have some of those devices to actually test on, which is a challenge for all of us.
Okay, we have another question from Paul, and he wants to know, not our Paul, but another Paul, attendee, and he wants to know what's the minimum server client configuration to dive into the mobile controls?
You know, pretty basic, to be perfectly honest. The mobile controls themselves are not heavy or don't have any kind of overhead, if you will. So in this particular case, I would say a Domino 901 server and a Notes Domino Designer 901 client, and that's all you need, honestly. As I say, the wizard itself requires the extension library, but you don't need the wizard in order to go ahead and get started building the mobile controls. I would definitely suggest downloading our 2012 presentation, because that'll take you step by step through how to do this without the wizard. And that, honestly, is enough to get started.
Okay. A repeat question from Leon. Maybe I can handle this one. How do you launch the wizard? And as long as you have the 901 extension library, correct me if I'm wrong, Graham, once you drag on the single page application control, it will launch the wizard.
Okay, well, I can demonstrate that, actually, since we have a little bit of time. So here, are you seeing my design screen?
I can see it. Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so here I have a blank X page, and I just go to single page application under mobile in my controls, and I drag it onto the page. I didn't set up my mobile prefix yet, so I'll just say continue. And here's the first step where Graham started, where you can create a new, general navigator view collection, whatever you want to do. But that's the beginning of it.
And it's just that simple. It's really just drag and drop, and away you go.
So I've got a follow-on question from John. Will the single-page application wizard be added to the IBM version of the extension library? So I guess that's the one that's built into the product. And if so, what version? Now, of course, we're not IBM and we can't comment on this, but what can you shed on that, Graham?
Well, I was going to say that's the million-dollar question. I would certainly expect that it will be. You know, this was something that was demoed, again, I saw for the first time in January in Orlando. So here we are almost a year later. And I think given the iOS 8 upgrade and the attention that's being thrown on the mobile controls right now, whether this is something that was planned or not, I have to think that it is. And so then it becomes a matter of, if it wasn't done yet for a future release, let's say 902, and I honestly don't know, but if it wasn't done yet, perhaps it's being put aside so that they can address the iOS 8 issues. I have to think, though, that we can expect it in the next release. I really don't know. But given the history of how different controls and functionality that are made available or that were made available in the extension library are now finding their way into the product, I would suggest that, yes, we're going to see this make its way into the product soon.
Okay, so just to kind of clarify, clarifying question from Jessica, does the Domino Server 901 have the extension library included out of the box, or does it have to be installed? Maybe you can just clarify what you get with the extension library from OpenNTF versus out of the box, Graham?
Yeah. So the comment that I had earlier, which I think I didn't do a very good job of explaining, is that as new releases are available from IBM, they choose what was previously released in the extension library to include in the main product. Maybe, Howard, can you bring up your Domino Designer again?
Sure.
So the thing that's confusing, if you go over and click on the controls on the right, there's a tab there just above mobile that says extension library. And this is unfortunately confusing. It still says extension library, but in fact, and I read this verbatim in the Mastering XPages book, these are not extension library controls. These are native controls that were previously released in the extension library that now are available in 901. Here's the problem, though. When you go and install the OpenNTF extension library, it does not differentiate between what was native out of the box and what's new in the OpenNTF extension library. And I think that's a failing. But I think they got themselves into trouble because, of course, when people started using the extension library in 852 and 853, it naturally made sense to create a separate tab called extension library. But then as we got comfortable using those controls, they found themselves in a bit of a predicament because if they were to say, okay, now this is part of the native set of tools that's available in 901, do we move it out of something called extension library and put it somewhere else and confuse our users as to where to go and find those controls? So it has become more difficult to make the differentiation between what's out of the box and what's included in the OpenNTF version of the extension library, unfortunately. So, Jessica, to answer your question, does it have the extension library included out of the box, or does it have to be installed? It's kind of an and question, actually. It does have a lot of the previous controls that we had of it as extension library controls now native, but there are more controls available from the latest OpenNTF extension library.
Well, to net that out, I think, Graham, specifically for the mobile, I think that the extension library from OpenNTF, the only thing that buys you is the wizard and the infinite scroll, right?
Correct. Yes, that is correct.
So if you're looking just at the mobile controls, that is the only two features that getting the OpenNTF version will get you. Everything else is in the box.
Yep, that's
or
correct.
901. Okay, we're running out of time. I think we have time for one more, Paul.
I don't have one more. I think we've run out of time here.
There is one, I think maybe we'll take as the last one, from Mahendran that just came in. And he was wondering, like, and the reason I asked this, Graham, is I think this is something Unplugged offers. That is there any way other than the mobile controls to do something where you have on the left having the navigation and the right side having the view or the document? And I think I've seen that in Unplugged, but I'm not I haven't really dived into Unplugged. Maybe you can answer that?
Yes, absolutely. The screenshot that I showed, which is available if you want to do the test, go to the Unplugged controls on a mobile device, and if you hold it landscape, this is something that Unplugged does really nicely. If you hold your device landscape, it will put the menu on the left, and then if you switch to portrait, it will pull the menu back up to the top. So again, that's a design consideration to say, you know, do I want my menu, where do I want to place my menu? But Unplugged gives you that option for sure.
Okay, thanks. So I think as everyone saw today, when it comes to mobile, you have a number of choices. You got the mobile controls, you know, you got the Unplugged that Graham just mentioned and showed, as well as going with a bootstrap type design, or with the new X controls that Team Studio is doing a session on. I think it's the 22nd. So, so a lot of different options that you want to look at, and probably different levels of complexity with each of those. So, you know, you can pick the right tool for what you need to do. And with that, I'd like to say, Graham, thank you so much for presenting. It's a great presentation, and I appreciate everyone attending today, and hope the rest of your day is great. And Courtney, do you have anything to add?
No, Howard, but thank you everyone for attending, and we will see you next month.
Thanks, Courtney. And just a reminder, I think we might have forgot to mention, but we will send out an email with a recording of this webinar as well as the slides in a few days. So thanks again, and have a great day. Bye.
Thank you.